I wanted to introduce to all the spiritual seekers on the internet the nasal spray route of administration for 5-MeO MALT and also 5-MeO DMT. I've not tried it with 5-MeO DMT myself, but I'm very confident that it will work because those two substances, they are very similar. But in either case, whichever chemical you use, definitely use the salt version. Now, straight away, I want to say that this method is a lot trickier than using the rear end administration. If it's your first time exploring with these chemicals, I would just suggest going with the rear end because there's a lot less to worry about. But there is some nice benefits to using the nasal route of administration, and I will cover all of that here, as well as some of the tricks involved and, the challenges involved and the limitations. In no way is this method better than the rear end, but some of you might prefer it. And actually right now, the next time I dose with 5-MeO MALT, I would prefer to do it via the nasal route. So the main reason I say it is trickier is because we have this challenge of dripping when we are doing a nasal spray. First of all, we are using a nasal spray and not just sniffing up the actual powder, because this powder really burns the nasal tissue. And I believe that is because you're taking clumps, grains of this chemical and putting it on a very small specific tissue, part of the tissue. Whereas ideally we want to spread a mist of dissolved chemical all over the nasal area so that it is dissolved more evenly across a large amount of tissue. And this very definitely, very noticeably reduces the burning by a lot. For me, it is like eating a very, very subtle chili. You can sense it's there, but it's not a problem at all. And definitely by the time you're feeling the chemical, the burning is not within your conscious worry at all. It subsides entirely by the time that you are having your come up. But because of this dripping, I would say you can expect an 80% efficiency here, even when you do it quite well. And it might take you some practice before you master it for yourself. As general tips straight away, I would recommend not sniffing too hard, because when you sniff, it's going to pull back the liquid and it's going to drip back down the throat. And when it drips backwards, then that's not very nice because it can actually cause some burning on the soft palate, the back of the throat. And if this liquid reaches the tongue, it doesn't taste good at all. If you put too much spray up your nose, you can also see that it will drip out of your nose once again, and go maybe on your mustache if you're a man and you haven't shaved. In this case, nothing bad will happen, but you are losing some of the chemical. So for this reason, as a philosophy, as an ideal, we want to put as few sprays as possible up the nose. Some people might really like, and you're welcome to try this, to create a whole bottle of dissolved liquid. And you can perhaps buy a batch of 5-MeO MALT, pour it all in a bottle, and then you calculate how much each spray has. But if you're putting too many sprays up your nose, then it's going to cause dripping, and we want to be very accurate with our dosage using this method. So with that, let's jump into my exact preference, my exact method for actually getting this nasal spray into the nose. So as always, we want to measure an exact dose using a milligram scale, and then we add a minimum amount of water. And of course, instead of using actual water, you're very welcome to use the nasal spray solution. Now, here is where a very specific piece of equipment is very useful, and that is a fountain pen ink cartridge. A clean one, of course. You can use this ink cartridge to now pull up your dissolved solution, and then you snugly fit that into your nasal spray head and push the solution into the head. So with using this fountain pen ink cartridge, it must very definitely fit snugly into the head of the nasal spray bottle. And of course, before doing all of that, make sure the head is actually empty. I'm sure there'll be many different brands that fit snugly together, but with my own experimentation, I found that the Parker fountain pen ink cartridge fits very well into the Bosistos eucalyptus nasal spray. These ink cartridges are called fountain pen converters when you search for them online. And I do actually encourage you don't buy the absolute cheapest ones available, because I did find that these can actually crack and break when you try to insert them into the tight fit of the nozzle head. So the idea here is to deliver most of the chemical up one nostril with the first spray. However, once you've done your first spray, you will probably notice there is a noticeable amount of colored liquid within the head. And because of this, we want to do a second spray up the other nostril. So simply take your ink vial again, suck up the same amount of water, push it into the head, and spray up the other nostril. And what you'll find is that delivers most of the chemical, but there will still be some residue left within the head and also in the ink cartridge itself. So you can take two routes here. Either you don't need to worry about it, simply accept the little bit of losses, and you can sort of comfort yourself and know that it's going to all balance itself out, because the next time you do a dose, that chemical is going to re-enter the system and some of it will then enter your nose. So you can think of it as the first time you do this, there's going to be some losses, but then the second time you do it, those losses will all balance out. However, if you want to be more accurate in your dosing, you can do a second round of sprays up each nostril. I would simply recommend that you wait 5 minutes or so before you do that, so that there's not too much water in the nose, because again, we want to minimize dripping. Compared to the rear end administration, the nasal spray route does take longer to come up. I haven't actually timed this, but I would just very roughly say that the rear end takes 5 minutes to really be noticeable, whereas this method takes 10. So that little bit of extra time does give you more of an opportunity to do a second spray cycle if you feel like you need to get more chemical out of here as the plane passes overhead. And with that airplane gone, I would now like to wrap up this topic. And that is just by saying that one reason I do like the nasal route of administration is because, for me at least, it can give a very nice Kachari type of effect. If you don't know what the Kachari effect is, I talk about it in this video if you're curious. But in essence, I would say, subjectively for me, by doing the nasal route of administration, it seems to activate more of the higher chakras, whereas the rear end administration is more active for the lower chakras. So with that theory, it would of course be good to use both techniques depending on what you want to experience and explore on that particular day. But maybe that's just me, because I do engage with the Kachari Mudra technique on a daily basis myself. But last time I did it and the time before that, there were such beautiful, sensual but profound experiences. The most recent time, it was like this fountain of divine milk, living waters, this very refined sattva was fountaining out of my body, out of the stem of my body somewhere. And it was like my deep spiritual thirst was being quenched at the Vishuddhi chakra. And it was extremely, extremely pleasant, very, very healing in its feelings. And if other people can experience that as well from the nasal route of administration, then I would love it. But I don't know what other people are going to experience, so I would actually enjoy it if you report back to me what you do find. How is it different to the rear end administration for you? And in particular, with the burning, I don't find it to be very bad at all. And after the whole experience, I find that there is only a very slight agitation in the nose for 24 hours, let's say, and after a day, there is no noticing that anything was ever up my nose at all. So for me, it feels healthy. It doesn't feel like I'm harming my body. But I would encourage you to pay careful attention for your own biology to see how much it upsets your nose. I'm sure some people out there will be very sensitive to the chemical in the nasal area. And in general, respect your body, listen to its signals, and also it would be very genuinely helpful for other people if you share your experiments, your findings, what happened with you personally, if you try this route of administration, because right now as I'm sharing this, as far as I know, I'm the only one that's ever done this. So it would just be useful if we have more of a bigger sample size